crowd cheer out to the 35. This time London. He held on. He's on to slip through and score. Bates talking. Jesse Bates interception. 15-10. Drive home safely.
What's up, Falcons fans, and welcome back to Falcons Final Whistle. I am here with Tori McElhaney overlooking Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We've got some post-game activities involving some children down here on the field.
Flag football?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're in a blast. They're going through a variety of drills right now. It's great. We're here to talk about the Falcons' 37-9 loss to the Seattle Seahawks. It is a loss that has officially eliminated Atlanta from the postseason. They were outgained by Seattle 365-274. Lost the turnover battle 3-1. They didn't score a touchdown. And Tori, anytime you have kind of those stats that I just read out, it's not going to be a good day, is it?
No, it's not. Those are kind of like all the things that mount in a loss, right? Yep. Like in these kids that we're looking at running through their drills, if they were to play, their 7-year-old Pee Wee League, if they were to turn the ball over as much as the Falcons did today, if they were to allow a 100-yard kickoff return, the fundamentals of the game are the same whether you're playing it at 7 years old or you're playing it at 25 years old on the world's biggest stage. And that was very evident today with the Falcons. And for lack of a better word, what they weren't able to do. It was very shocking to me how quickly the team went from playing pretty well in that first half, especially defensively.
Yep.
I mean, it was pretty lights out defensively up until that final drive where it set him up for a field goal at the very, very end of that second quarter. But prior to that, you were like, all right, they're in it. Like, they're making plays. This defense was fun to watch. And then you come out of halftime and just the dagger of that 100-yard kickoff return followed immediately by a fumble, followed immediately by interceptions thereafter. And all the while, the Seahawks are scoring. I think that third quarter was the most points differential that the Falcons have had in a very, very long time, giving up as many touchdowns and as many scores as they did to Seattle.
Yeah, and I mean, we knew that Seattle was a good team coming in here. This was going to be a hard fought, even if the Falcons brought their best game, and that is why, the first quarter, as you mentioned, they're keeping things tight. They're kind of doing what they need to. But then the rest of the game happened, and the end result drops Atlanta to 4-9 on the season. But let's go ahead and kind of dig into this game. For those who are new here, here's what we do. We go 4 quarters of action. We got 6 minutes per quarter. When our quarter ends, we have this sound, and that is going to tell us to move right along. So let's start first quarter. Falcons officially eliminated from the playoffs. That was always going to be the case if they lost on Sunday. And it is just kind of a disappointing season the way everything is unfolded, and this was kind of an exclamation point on that.
Yeah, 100%. This was a team that going into, no one made it any type of secret at all that 2025 was supposed to be the Falcons' year. Mm-hmm. Like, at the bare minimum was supposed to be the year that they were ahead of the NFC South. And now you're kind of looking at where the NFC South stands, and it's like, is the Carolina Panthers, are they going to be the NFC South champions? Because as it stands right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have lost, I think, 5 of their last 7, including today losing to the New Orleans Saints, which if the New Orleans Saints would have beaten Tampa Bay and the Falcons would have beaten the Seahawks, then you were still talking about like the Falcons are still alive. But of course now we can't say that, despite the fact that the Saints did what they needed to do. They held up their end of the bargain for it. The Panthers obviously on their bye week this week. So I think it's one of those things that I think I said this to you last week when we were talking about what Carolina did to the Rams last week only extrapolated like how bad the Falcons should feel after coming off of their last loss against the Jets. Now, seeing the Saints beat Tampa Bay, having already beaten Carolina earlier in the year too, like that just goes to show that this NFC South was ripe for the taking.
Yes.
And the Falcons did not show up in 2025 to take what I think a lot of people thought they could.
Yeah, it just felt like this was a year where you just had to be in the mix.
Yeah.
Right? You just had to kind of tread water. You didn't have to be a dominant team, right? That you look at the NFC West, the NFC North, those are going to be absolute kind of slugfests, I think, all the way down the stretch. But the NFC South is competitive, but it's not competitive in the sense of domination that you're seeing some of the best teams in the other divisions have. And so, that is, especially given the way that Atlanta's defense turned the corner this season, you, on paper, at the beginning of the year, if I told you that one simple fact that, hey, Atlanta's defense, we're going to be kind of going into the bye week being like, oh my God, Atlanta's defense, number one in DVOA, all of these things, you would say, I'm going to feel great about Atlanta kind of being in the mix come week 14 and not being officially eliminated at the end of it.
Yeah.
And, I'm wondering, though, if at the end of the day, is the outcome all that matters from this game, or does the way that Atlanta and that outcome happened matter as well?
Yeah, I think it matters. I think if you would have gone and played this game for all 4 quarters the way you played the first 2, then you feel a bit better.
Yeah.
I don't think you're ever going to feel great because a loss regardless was going to eliminate you because of everything that you have done or not done to this point.
Right.
So, I don't think there are any moral victories.
Like a loss is a loss is a loss.
Right,
type of thing, right.
But you could at least be like, well, this defense really played great for 4 quarters. That didn't happen. Or this special teams unit really got their heads on straight. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Or this offense really moved the ball. Bijan was running all over the field. That didn't really happen, despite the fact that I felt like they had good moments here and there. Or even something along the lines of, like, you have receivers that you feel like you can rely upon outside of Drake London. Like, can you feel any of that type of way after a performance like this? I don't think you can.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think everybody coming into this game, I heard a couple of things, right? It was Seattle is one of the best teams in the NFL, and man, this is going to be a hard game.
Yeah.
I also heard a lot of people being like, this is the game Atlanta kind of wins sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You think back to Buffalo, or you think back to some of the bigger games against bigger teams or marquee teams kind of coming in here, and sometimes that's when Atlanta plays its best football. It gets up for the challenge. As much as we kind of shake our fists at some of the head-scratching losses, they also have some really surprise underdog wins. That wasn't the case at all today, and in some ways, it not only illuminated or continued to shine a light on some of the issues that have plagued the season or the team all season, it may have identified a few more. Yeah,
well, I think that some of to your point, these aren't new issues. You know, the special teams giving up 100-yard kickoff return is not a new issue. This is now the 3rd week in a row where they've given up a 70-plus yarder. Falcons offense on 3rd down. They're one of 13. One of 13 today, which, crazy enough, I think is it's the worst mark in a game with 10-plus attempts since 1991 for this team. So all of that to say, a lot of these things aren't new. They're not new things. We've been talking about special teams over the course of this season. We've been talking about the Falcons' inability to move the ball on 3rd down for the entirety of the season. So that's why I understand where the fans' frustration comes from, because those things aren't getting fixed. And they're showing up, it feels like, more and more instead of less and less, which is what you want and shows sign of things being fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of is what is left to play for at this point, is at least a sense of improvement, right? Is that the areas that you have identified, and the Falcons had a big one they can point to in the red zone. That was an issue early on that did get fixed, but 3rd down has continued to be a problem, perhaps one of the biggest problems for any team in kind of the NFL. They have not been good for a while.
Kirk literally said last week that if the Falcons can look at 3rd down over the next 5 weeks of the season and feel like they improved there, you feel a bit better about what you have going on offensively. You just put up your worst 3rd down percentage since 1991. So what you said last week didn't happen. That's not on Kirk. That's on the whole team. It's on the whole operation.
Absolutely, it is. And we'll continue to see where they go from there, but we are going to continue right along to the 2nd quarter. Oh boy, look at that topic note. Offense is a major concern at this point. Kirk Cousins, speaking of him, he has been solid in his last 2 starts, but today, not so much, right? Not so much to write home about. He finished 15 of 30 for 162 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One was kind of tipped off, but it was just not a great day, I think, writ large for the offense. Kyle Pitts had a good game. Bijan Robinson had his other, his typical game. But when you're 1 of 13, like that's the headline. Did you notice any commonalities on third down? I know you kind of did a deep dive into Atlanta's third down midway through the season. Mm-hmm. Was there anything today that stuck out to you, or was it kind of here and there and a bunch of different things?
I mean, it's the same. I feel like a broken record saying this, but it's like third down situations for this team are not like one size fits all.
Yeah.
Like they had some penalties that pushed them back and got them off track. They had some third and short opportunities that they just didn't convert. Like there were it wasn't like I could sit here and say, and I even said this weeks ago when I was going through all of the third down issues, it's like I wish I could sit here and say that there is one or two things that are that's happening on third down that if they fix these one or two things, it's going to magically change what they're doing on third down and their production on third down. I can't say that. And I think that's why it's such a difficult problem to fix. Ultimately, it does, I think, come down to execution and executing what you're being asked to do. But also kind of, there were a couple screenplays that I didn't necessarily think were executed accordingly, one of which was the David Sills. He tipped it up and the ball's intercepted. Like, I think the interceptions on the couple of the interceptions was the ball hitting a receiver in the hands and being tipped up into the air. And that was exactly kind of what we saw last week against the Jets too on that final 2-minute drive. One of the final 2-minute drives where Kirk's putting it on their hands and they're not catching the ball. Like, there are just certain things that, especially when it comes to third down, like these are critical situational moments that you need to show up for. And I don't think there's been more times than not that the Falcons collectively have shown up on third down, regardless of what the situation is, regardless of down and distance, regardless of time on the clock, where they are in terms of score, all of it. Like, it's not, again, it's hard to say that it's one thing, and if they fix this one thing, it means that their entire third down operation would be different. Yeah,
it would be one thing if kind of like your interior blocking was just letting you down. So it's like, all right, we got to adjust and go outside of the tackles, or we got to improve in that area. Mm-hmm. But there have been just a number of things, and it is really hard when it's drops. And
well, I think even like 3 of the turnovers came on third down. Yeah, the Bijan fumble, he had the first down, he fumbles the ball. Like, those are just things you can't have happen. Like, if you, again, critical moments where you need to move the chains, at that point it's just like, all right. Like,
well, it's also the difference too in opponent last week and this week is the Falcons were kind of making those mistakes, and it felt like it allowed the Jets to stay in it and then ultimately win the game. In this one, it was like the Falcons need to play clean football and get that turnover by Mike Hughes and do X, Y, and Z to probably keep up with the Seahawks. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to get kind of blown out.
Well, you bring up a really good point about the turnover by Mike Hughes, the one that tipped off of A.J. Terrell's hands and into Mike Hughes' hands. I think that there was a stat that I really wanted to pull up. Oh, yes, here it is. The Falcons have struggled to turn turnovers into points. So even if the defense is doing their job and getting hands on the balls, recovering fumbles, et cetera,
you're not doing anything with it.
You're not doing anything with it. The Falcons, as of today, they have scored just 19 points off of 16 takeaways this season.
Wow.
Further context in that is that the only team with fewer points off takeaways is the Jets with 10 points. You want to know how many turnovers, takeaways they've had this year? 2. Oh. 2 to Atlanta's 16, and yet they have 9 points less.
And they did score those.
Yes.
They did score points on each of those turnovers.
They just don't have any takeaways.
Wow, that is a great stat. And I was actually looking into the third down stuff, and so since week 8, right, these last 7 games for Atlanta, 8 through 14, the Falcons have a 19.5% conversion rate on third down. That's really when their struggles began. That is among the lowest since 2000. I started kind of going there being like, this has got to be maybe third lowest. It turns out there are a few teams in 7-game stretches that are like 15%.
Oh, wow.
But they're not company you want to keep.
Yeah.
It's like
you don't want to be with those people.
It's like the Chicago Bears teams and Arizona Cardinals and New York Jets from the early 2000s who were struggling. So Atlanta really, again, it kind of is a couple of things, but I think chief among them is a lack of really trusted options with Drake London off of the field. And Darnell Mooney has been kind of a disappointment this season relative to where he was last year. Saw kind of the drop touchdown today, but maybe the swing play of the game early on was that what seemed to be, at least to me, a touchdown by Darnell Mooney. Officials call it ultimately incomplete. Tori, can you break down everything that happened there early on?
Yeah, so it's tough. So we did have a pool reporter, Josh Kendall, went and had a conversation with the league officials about what happened, why they called what they called, and essentially, and I'll kind of give you the Spark Notes version of this because I think it can get a little bit convoluted, but officials stuck to the call that he did not reestablish himself after running out of bounds on the route. Mm-hmm. So that was the call on the field, was that he ran out of bounds, came back in, caught the ball before he was truly established back in the field of play. So they stood by that. They also added that even if they did feel like he actually did reestablish himself back in the field of play, that it actually would have been an illegal touch because they felt like Darnell Mooney went out of bounds on his own volition.
Okay.
And an important part of that piece, so that was what was ruled on the field, and an important part of that is that is not a reviewable entity. So so
the call on the field is going to be the call on the field.
Right. So if he did, even if he did get pushed out of bounds, and I haven't gone back and watched the replay, even if he does get pushed out of bounds, if that's not the call that was on the field, that's not a review. You can't go back and be like, well, he was pushed out of bounds, so that's why all of this happened. Unfortunately, that's not a reviewable set of circumstances.
Well, yeah, and so the end result, because I believe that was a third down play as well.
Yeah.
So the Falcons, instead of getting a touchdown there at the end of the second quarter, they run out the field goal team. They tack on a field goal, but then Seattle ultimately kind of moves right down the field, and they erase that 3-point lead that you built. And it really felt like just kind of a momentum blow.
Well, it was interesting because Raheem Morris and Kirk Cousins were both asked, like, was that a back-breaking moment? Was that a momentum swing? And Raheem Morris especially said, no, I don't think it was. It felt more like the kickoff return for a touchdown coming out of halftime was more of the momentum swing, is what he said.
Yeah. I mean, hey, getting those two back-to-back, that's pretty
bad.
Yeah,
not great.
All right, well, that is our whistle. So we will move into halftime. And as always, halftime is presented by Microsoft Copilot. So today's halftime stat, we're going to talk a little bit about Bijan Robinson, who had a good game outside of that fumble on Sunday. As usual, go check out Taryn Walk's piece on AtlantaFalcons.com, kind of highlighting what Bijan has been able to accomplish, even in the midst of a down and disappointing year for the Atlanta Falcons. But on Sunday, he became the third player in NFL history with at least 3,500 rushing yards and 1,500 receiving yards through his first 3 NFL seasons. That is insane.
Yeah.
And he joined on that list Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson, who is one of my favorite players to compare him to.
Yeah.
And maybe one of my favorite all-time Falcons, William Andrews, who is perpetually overlooked just because there's not that much film on him. But he was amazing.
Yeah, he's the one guy that every time Bijan breaks a record, he's breaking his record.
William Andrews is awesome, but so is Bijan Robinson.
It's so unfortunate that this team is 4-9 right now. As I think we said on the Friday 5 podcast, and it's even something that I said, I'm writing a story on why Bijan Robinson deserves your Pro Bowl vote, which he does.
Oh, absolutely.
That is one of the things. It's like if this team was 9-4, if this team had a 500 record, if they still were kind of in playoff talks, playoff contention, Bijan Robinson is a name that would be known league-wide. What he's doing this year and the numbers he's putting up would be talked about by everyone because what he's doing is so crazy, and it sucks that it is being overshadowed by the team underperforming overall.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who watches a Falcons game, I do think comes away being like,
oh, Bijan.
Yeah. He's one of them.
Yeah.
But like you said, the team success does matter when you're talking about the overall national view of a player, unfortunately. So that is our halftime stat presented by Microsoft Copilot. Bijan Robinson, you keep doing Bijan Robinson things. And
we watching it.
Are going to roll right along to the third quarter. Let's talk a little bit about Atlanta's defense. You kind of noted them up top. I thought they started out strong. James Pierce Jr. specifically really kind of got off to a good start. What did you make of their beginning performance, and then we'll get to the overall performance?
Yeah, so it felt like this is like kind of like an old adage, old cliche that gets used quite a bit, but it really did feel like the tale of two halves because their first half performance and what they were able to do and how uncomfortable they were making Sam Darnold in the pocket, like the turnovers, and they just felt like peak Atlanta defense, how fun they've been to watch all year.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like in those first two quarters. They ended up having a really, really impressive first half statistically. They gave up just 6 points, which is the fewest in the first half this season for them. 111 total yards, the fewest first half yards this season. 7 first downs, second fewest in the first half this season. 55 net passing yards, the second fewest in the first half this season. So they were putting up some of their, it was one of their best halves of football as a collective unit. And then it just got absolutely flipped on its head coming out in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, like Seattle's, granted, this is the first possession, but their first possession minus 10 yards. I was like, they're on pace to have like negative 130 yards in this game. That's crazy.
It's like Georgia, Alabama, negative 3 rushing yards,
There we
like
go.
in the SEC championship. Plug.
Yeah, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
SEC champions, once again. What up? But yeah, it was... That has been the case for a few of these games. Tampa Bay week 1, same exact thing. You start out and you're like, all right, Tampa's offense, Baker Mayfield, here we go. And then they're in the shadow of their own end zone and they never escape it. And they like didn't for the entire first quarter. It was really the moment that I think I felt that shift for Atlanta's defense was after Bijan's fumble. Yeah. And that was kind of the first moment where Atlanta really needed to step up and kind of keep them in this game. At that point, it was still a 2-possession game, I believe, and really allowing Seattle to march down the field in the way that they did with a couple of explosive plays, a couple of conversions.
Yeah. Was that the touchdown from Darnold to JSW? That was A.J. Terrell's, the first touchdown that he had given up all season long.
Yeah,
was it
the 28-yard pass.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that, knowing that too, like that's such a dagger as well because A.J. has been, I mean...
He was good to start this game as well.
He was. I'm not saying that any of this is on AJ. Like JSW has been one of the best, if not the best receivers in the NFC. Like so.
But he started this game with like 5 targets, 2 receptions for 19 yards. Yeah. And I was like, they're trying to. He had a third down play where it looked like JSN was going to pick up the first down, and he kind of punched the ball out, it ends up bouncing a yard short.
Yeah.
And so
that was the thing going into this game. I think we even talked about it on the podcast. Like. I remember saying, and I don't know if I said this on our podcast or I went on a Seahawks podcast this week, but saying kind of like, you know that JSW is going to get his. Like, he's too good to not have his moments. It's about limiting those moments. And I felt like in the first half, he was limited. I felt that way. But then after that, kickoff return, fumble, they go down and score, like that momentum shift in the first half of the third quarter was such a game changer for how the rest of the game went.
Yes, and all right, so I've got these numbers from Next Gen Stats. Okay. Speaking of AJ and Jackson Smith and Jigba, so they matched up against each other 22 times, and on those 22 times, JSN caught 5 passes, 7 targets for 81 yards and a touchdown. So that's definitely a win, I think, for Seattle's top receiver, but when you look at some of the games that he has had, and he did end up with a pretty good game here in Atlanta, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think any receiver would take that any day of the week. But I think it's also safe to say this was probably AJ's worst game against an individual receiver this season. So I think that puts into perspective ultimately how well AJ has played throughout the year. It's kind of the life of a corner. It is, yeah. Right?
I mean, that's the thing is like you have to have a certain level of thick skin to play corner because you are out on an island so much and your mistakes are amplified tenfold. Like a lot of, sometimes unless an offensive lineman gives up a sack or something, you don't necessarily, it's one of those things that you don't talk about them unless it's like blatantly obvious that something went wrong. And sometimes corner ends up being that same type of conversation.
Absolutely. And 14 of those 22 times they won against each other, he was in coverage against him, was man coverage. Yeah. So that's a high level of faith from Jeff Holbrick in A.J. Terrell, again, against the receiver who is more productive than any other in the league so far this year. So, I mean, we'll get to kind of like some of the building pieces of Atlanta's defense, I'm sure, on future episodes. Right now, though, is there enough here about Atlanta's defense that you kind of still feel good going into the offseason, putting a lot of your focus on the offense? Or does it feel like, no, there's some areas here that you still really need to invest in going into the offseason?
I think you have a lot of decisions to make. I say a lot. It really is only a few about how you're going to handle personnel, because Caden Ellis is on a contract year. So if you do have him walk, what is the next iteration of the interior look like, knowing that when Divine Diablo wasn't out there for 4 weeks when he was on IR, that made a difference in how Atlanta played. So, like, if Caden Ellis wasn't out there, how big of a difference would he make by not? And I do think it would matter greatly. So you have a decision to make within the interior. You like the way a lot of these young guys are playing. You have AJ Terrell on for, a number of years. He just signed an extension not too long ago. So I'm okay moving forward with a lot of the core individuals that you've had this year, and you hope that you see a shift in kind of their ability to make the most out of the moments that ultimately matter, right?
Yes,
those big third downs, the interceptions, the turnovers, not letting them march down the field with 2 minutes to go in the second quarter before end of half, like those type of things.
Definitely, and I do think that this is a defense ultimately that is built to protect a lead, which unfortunately the Falcons have not been able to do much this season. But moving to the fourth quarter, if defense we feel pretty good about aside from some of these key decisions you have to make, then I do think you shift your attention to the other two phases of the ball for this offseason and where it's concerned. And to me, Sunday's game clarified and also cemented a couple of areas that the Falcons definitely need to address this offseason. Chief among them is special teams.
Yeah.
And that has been something that Atlanta has been able to hang its hat on, one phase or the other, right? When Avery Williams was here, you had some really good punt returns and kickoff returns to feel good about.
He led punt return average by like a significant margin that 1 year.
It was crazy. And so this has been a unit at times, again, you've been able to kind of rely on. This year, that is not the case. Seahawks blocked a field goal early in this game, and then, of course, the 100-yard touchdown return to start the second half that felt like a momentum shift for sure.
It was, and it was also one of those things because you can't think about that moment in a vacuum.
No.
Because, again, I think I said this at the beginning of the pod, this is now the third major kickoff return that you have given up in just as many weeks. In 3 consecutive weeks, you gave up a 70-plus yarder to the Saints, you gave up an 80-plus yarder to the Jets, and now you gave up a 100-yarder to the Seahawks. That's not sustainable, because in a game that comes down to one score is usually, not that this one was, but in this league prides itself on having so many of these one-score games and that it draws excitement up for the viewer. Special teams has to do their part too. And how many times have we said, even prior to these last couple of years, like, that was why they had such conviction in Younghoe Koo. That's why Younghoe Koo was here for so long when there was an obvious decline, was because of what he had done previously. And I think that you're at the point now where you have to face it head on. And I don't know what that means. I don't get paid to make those decisions, but at this point in time, it is what you have right now is not sustainable. And you're seeing now for the third week in a row, it has come down to bite you in moments that matter.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting to me, and I'd love to pick your brain on this, is special teams is comprised of, a lot of different parts of your roster. It's not just we've got our starters for over here, like offense, defense, those guys. Special teams comes from everywhere. And so, a team may have 2 or 3 special team kind of aces. For Atlanta, Mike Ford is kind of chief among them. Daryl Hodge last year, still this year. Felipe Franks, those guys are your core special teamers. But to me, special teams has always been a little bit of an indicator of the overall depth and strength of a 53-man roster. And so while we can look at the starting unit for Atlanta and maybe feel good about the names across that, I'm wondering if this isn't a bigger maybe warning sign of like the overall 1 through 53 and the level of that talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. It's one that you can't watch what's happened in the last 3 weeks and not question that. I think that, I haven't gone back and watched the last one, the All-22, and, I don't want to... My thing with special teams is, like, I wish I knew more about kind of what is being asked. It's kind of sometimes...
There's so many moving pieces on any...
Right, yeah. And that's not me making an excuse for what we've seen. That's not me making an excuse at all. It's just like my
We don't want to provide wrong information.
Right, yeah. So my thing is that, like, I don't know what you have to do to fix it, but you got to fix it. So, like, do it. Put the effort into doing it because, like, again, this is not a sustainable way to... You're putting yourself in harm's way every single time you're now in a kickoff situation. Like, you're now at the point in time where do you trust this at all to kick it inside the landing zone and feel comfortable with your coverage? At this point in time, after what we've seen the last 3 weeks, no, I'm kicking out the back of the end zone every time.
Yeah, and that's not, when you want to be able to play a field position game, when you want to be able to do some strategic things, you can't live that way.
Yeah.
I kind of feel some of the same way where, like, do what you got to do to fix it about the receiver room.
Yeah.
Sunday, the top 2 receivers on this offense were Kyle Pitts and Tyler Algier. I don't know if I ever want to see Tyler Algier.
Yeah.
I love Tyler Algier. I don't want him to be second in receiving yards for a day. So
that's crazy. I didn't even know that.
Dylan Drummond, the top receiver with 21 yards. So again, mention kind of Darnell Mooney and how he hasn't lived up to what we expected coming into the year. Drake has obviously not been on the field, but to me, this is like the number one priority this offseason should be that receiver position and depth specifically.
It's crazy too, because if you would have told me back in August, June, July, like over the summer, that this is where this receiver room would be, I wouldn't believe you at all. Because I felt going into this year, I mean, how could you not? How could you have expected, hold on, I know you're about to say something, but how could you have expected that there was going to be this significant level of decline when you had a season last year where you had 3 guys who had career years?
Yeah.
And you had your 4th receiver who made some clutch plays for your team and also was a Pro Bowl special teamer. Like, there were so many things about this wide receiver core that I was like, okay, you could maybe add a few pieces here with depth, but like I was willing to go and do whatever I needed to do defensively to help out your defense. That, receiver was on the list, but it wasn't as high. And now looking back, it's like, to what you were saying around draft season, like, should the Falcons have drafted a receiver? As people were asking us all the time in the mailbag, as you're leading up to the trade deadline, should the Falcons trade for a receiver? Like, receiver has turned into this position group that went from being one of the ones that you were most confident in to now, I'm not saying you're blowing the whole thing up, but outside of Drake London, you haven't had the level of performance that you've needed.
Absolutely. I agree. Sorry to just ignore the whistle here, but I think it's important always going into each season, and certainly training camp. We got a taste of this like right at the beginning of training camp, is to always kind of look at, sure, what's the best case scenario, what's a reasonable scenario, and then what's the worst case scenario. And that's where, if you looked at the worst case scenarios for Atlanta, you could see a situation in which the floor dropped out pretty quickly, because once you got past the proven guys from last year, and that was really only still 1 year of it all working together, you had some question marks after that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's kind of the way it played out for Atlanta. So we have a lot of time remaining to still talk about off-season plans, where they go from here. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and unfortunately, the Falcons are now 4-9 after this 37-9 loss to the Seattle Seahawks. But they have a very quick turnaround before a Thursday night matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are also, again, licking their chops, and they haven't been doing so great recently either. So we will see which team can rebound and get things back on track. Tori, you got anything else before we get out of here?
I'm excited for Thursday night because it's going to be the best looking game of the entire 2025 season, because it's the throwback game. So you have the creamsicles with Tampa Bay, and then you have the red helmets with the Falcons.
Ooh,
so I'm pretty pumped about that. Just like as someone who loves like creative photography and stuff, I'm super excited to see what our photo team does.
Yeah, the visuals from that game are going to be really, really nice.
Using some like digital film stuff. Like I'm excited.
Yeah, a little
anything, for
fashion
how it'll
action on
look,
Thursday
you know?
Night Football. I love it. A quick programming note: we are not going to have the Friday Five this week. We will have another final whistle coming after that Thursday night game, so be on the lookout for that. But for Tori McElhaney, I am Will McFadden. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as always, and we will see you on Friday.